They told you to open up. They told you that the right woman would love you more if you showed her everything. Your fears, your doubts, your dreams, your wounds. They told you that vulnerability was the bridge to real connection. That honesty, total, unfiltered, raw honesty, was the highest form of respect you could offer a woman. And you believed them. So you did it. You opened up. You shared your struggles. You talked about your insecurities. You told her about the nights you couldn't sleep, the job that wasn't going the way you planned, the relationship with your father that never healed. You gave her everything. You thought, this is what a real man does. A mature man. An evolved man. A man who isn't afraid to feel. And then something shifted. It didn't happen all at once. It was subtle. The way she looked at you changed. The energy between you lost its charge. She started pulling back in ways she couldn't even explain. And you kept giving more, thinking that more openness would fix what more openness had broken. You thought the solution was the same as the cause. It wasn't. Here's the truth they never taught you. Attraction is not built on full disclosure. It is not built on transparency. It is not built on emotional availability at all times. Attraction is built on tension, on mystery, on the sense that there is something in a man that cannot be fully reached, fully known, fully possessed. The moment a woman feels she's seen every corner of you, the moment nothing remains hidden, something fundamental changes. Not because she is cruel, not because she doesn't care, but because the human brain is wired to pursue what it has not yet fully understood. What you are about to hear is not a guide to manipulation. It is not a guide to deception. It is a guide to discipline, to the kind of eternal control that separates men who are desired from men who are simply known. There are 5 things, 5 specific, concrete things, that a man must never fully reveal to a woman. Not because he is hiding who he is, but because he understands that what he withholds shapes how he is perceived just as powerfully as what he shows. Pay attention. This changes everything. Before we get into the 5 things, you need to understand why this works at the level of biology. Because this isn't about playing games. This isn't about being cold or distant or emotionally unavailable. This is about understanding how attraction actually functions in the human brain, and then behaving accordingly. For hundreds of thousands of years, the human brain developed a specific response to unpredictability. When something or someone could not be fully predicted, the brain activated. It stayed alert. It kept returning. It kept trying to solve what it could not yet fully solve. This is not a modern phenomenon. It is not a cultural artifact. It is wiring, deep, ancient, evolutionary wiring. A man who is fully knowable is a man the brain can file away, processed, categorized, safe perhaps, comfortable maybe, but no longer magnetizing, no longer compelling. The nervous system stops reaching toward what it already fully understands. A man who retains mystery, who expresses selectively, who does not narrate his entire interior world, who carries things quietly and processes them internally before he ever speaks them. That man creates a gravitational field around himself. He becomes someone worth studying, worth pursuing, worth keeping attention on. This is not about being closed off. This is about being disciplined. There's a profound difference between a man who has nothing to say and a man who chooses carefully what he says. The first is empty. The second is powerful. And the 5 rules you're about to hear are built on exactly that distinction. The first thing a man must never fully reveal is his pain and his struggles. Let me be clear about what this means and what it doesn't mean. It does not mean you pretend nothing is hard. It does not mean you perform in vulnerability like a mask you never take off. It means you understand the difference between processing your pain and broadcasting it. It means you know the difference between sharing something meaningful at the right moment and using another person as an emotional dumping ground because you haven't learned to carry your own weight. Here's what most men do. Something difficult happens, a setback at work, a failure, a loss, a fear, and they take it directly to the woman in their life, unprocessed, raw, in real time. They narrate the wound as it is being inflicted, and they do this not because it helps them heal, but because they haven't developed any other mechanism for coping. The woman becomes the container for everything they cannot hold themselves, and she will hold it at first because she cares, because she wants to support you. But over time, and this is the part no one tells you, something shifts in how she sees you. The man who comes to her with unprocessed pain again and again stops looking like a partner. He starts looking like someone who needs to be managed, cared for, handled. and that is not a dynamic that sustains desire. Now contrast that with a different kind of man, a man who goes through hard things, and he does, because every man does, but who processes them first, who sits with the difficulty, who works through it internally or with other men, or through action before he speaks. And when he does share, he shares with precision. He says, "This was a hard week. I'm working through something." He does not deliver a 45-minute monologue about every layer of his anxiety. He gives her signal without noise. He lets her know he is human without making her feel responsible for his emotional state. That man is respected. That man is trusted. That man is seen as stable. And stability, real, demonstrated stability, is one of the most powerful things a man can project. Your pain is real. Your struggles are real, but they are yours to carry first. Share selectively. Share after you have done the internal work. Share with intention, not desperation. The man who bleeds in public loses something. The man who bleeds privately and emerges composed gains something. Learn the difference. The second thing a man must keep private is his inner world, his deepest thoughts, his emotional architecture, the full landscape of what moves inside him. This is where modern culture has done the most damage, because the message everywhere, in films and self-help and therapy speak that has leaked into everyday conversation, is that full emotional transparency is the goal, that the ideal man is one who can articulate every feeling, name every emotion, share every thought as it arrives. And women say they want this, and they mean it when they say it. But meaning something and being attracted to it are two entirely different things. Here is the rule. Say less than you think. Imply more than you state. Let her wonder. When a man narrates his entire mind, when he makes himself completely readable, when there is no gap between what he thinks and what he says, he removes one of the most fundamental sources of intrigue. He becomes a text written in large print with no subtext. And subtext is where fascination lives. Think about the men who have held women's attention across time. Not just in real life, but in every story, every film, every myth. They are never the men who explained everything. They are the men who said less than they knew, who carried something behind their eyes that could not quite be reached, who gave you the sense that there was more, always more, beneath the surface. This does not mean you become a closed book. It means you become a book that takes time to read. You reveal in chapters, not in a single sitting. You allow discovery to happen over time because discovery is pleasurable. The moment there is nothing left to discover, the journey ends. In practice, this means you stop narrating your reactions in real time. You stop explaining why you feel what you feel every time you feel it. You stop filling silence with emotional commentary. You let some things remain unspoken, not because you are suppressing them, but because you understand that silence can communicate strength more effectively than words. A man of few words who speaks with precision is more compelling than a man of many words who leaves nothing to the imagination. This is not an opinion. This is a pattern that repeats across cultures, across centuries, across every domain of human attraction. Keep part of your inner world yours. Protect it not because you are hiding, but because you understand its value. The third thing, and this is where most men collapse, is their insecurities, their fears, and their doubts. Now, before you misunderstand this, let me make a critical distinction. There is a version of vulnerability that is powerful. There is a version that is weak. Powerful vulnerability sounds like __, quote _1 __ weak. Vulnerability sounds like, quote 2. One of these communicates self-awareness and internal processing. The other communicates that you need someone else to stabilize you because you cannot stabilize yourself. The first is controlled vulnerability. The second is uncontrolled fragility. And while the world tells you both are equally valid, attraction does not treat them equally. Here's what happens when a man overexposes his insecurities. He is essentially handing someone else the map to his weak points, and asking them to guard those points for him. That is not intimacy. That is dependency. Real intimacy is built between two people who are each internally stable, who share vulnerabilities from a position of strength, not desperation, who reveal a crack in the armor as a moment of trust, not as a plea for rescue. The man who constantly seeks reassurance, who needs to be told he is attractive, that he is enough, that she still loves him, that everything is okay, is exhausting to be near, not because the woman doesn't care, but because she cannot be both the source of his confidence and his partner at the same time. The role is too large. It eventually collapses under its own weight. The man who moves through his insecurities privately, who does not perform his doubts, who does not advertise his fears, who works on his confidence without making it someone else's responsibility, that man projects something entirely different. He projects groundedness, centeredness, the sense that even when things are hard, he will not require management. Reveal in layers. Stabilize before you share. Let her see your humanity, but let her see it in controlled doses, at moments you have chosen, in ways that invite respect rather than rescue. This is not suppression. Suppression is when you bury something and never process it. What we are talking about is timing, context, and selective disclosure. Process internally. Share intentionally. The result is a man who feels safe without feeling fragile. That balance is everything. The fourth thing a man must never expose is his need for validation and his emotional dependence. Listen carefully, because this is the one that destroys more relationships than any other. This is the silent killer. The dynamic most men never see until it is too late. Here's the fundamental law of relational power. The one who needs less leads. Not because leadership is about need, but because emotional self-sufficiency creates a gravitational pull that neediness actively destroys. When a man makes a woman responsible for his emotional regulation, when he needs her approval to feel good about himself, when he needs her attention to feel secure, when her mood determines his mood, he has transferred control of his entire inner state to someone else. And that transfer is felt. It is sensed even when it is never spoken. Women describe this in different words. They say he became too clingy, too much, too intense. They say they felt suffocated. They say they don't know why, but something changed. What changed is that the man revealed he could not hold himself up without her. And the moment she understood that, consciously or not, the dynamic shifted. She became the anchor. He became the weight. And anchors do not desire the weight they carry. They endure it. Now think about the opposite. The man who validates himself, who does not need constant confirmation that things are good between them, who can sit in uncertainty, not knowing where she stands, not having heard from her in 2 days, and remain stable, focused, engaged in his own life. That man is magnetic in a way the first man will never understand. This is not about pretending you don't care. Caring is not the problem. Caring visibly, proportionately, at the right moments. That is depth. The problem is when caring becomes a constant demand for reassurance, when love becomes an anxiety loop, when the relationship turns into a mechanism for managing his emotional deficits rather than two full people choosing each other. Validate yourself first. Build a life that would be rich without her. Have ambitions, friendships, habits, an inner world that exists independently of her presence. When she sees that her absence does not collapse you, when she understands that you are with her by choice, not by need, something fundamental changes in how she experiences you. Reduce the reassurance seeking. Stop asking indirectly or directly if she still finds you attractive. Stop analyzing her messages for signs of withdrawal. Stop making her mood your problem to solve. Let her be where she is. Stay where you are. The man who holds his own ground without reaching for hers is the man who commands real respect. The fifth thing, and this is one that most men violate without even realizing it, is your future plans before they are real. This one cuts against a very common instinct. When a man is excited about something, a business idea, a goal, a plan for his life, he wants to share it, especially with a woman he is interested in or already with. He wants to paint the picture. He wants her to see the vision. He thinks, if she understands where I'm going, she will believe in me. She will be excited. She will see my potential. And what actually happens is the opposite. Talking about what you are going to do before you have done it creates the sensations of movement without the reality of it. You spend the energy of accomplishment in the conversation before the accomplishment exists. She hears the dream. She sees the excitement. And then time passes, and the dream is still a dream. And every time it comes up, every time she remembers what you said, the gap between the words and the reality grows slightly larger, and in that gap, a certain kind of respect quietly dissolves. Here is the rule. Show results, not intentions. Execute first. Speak after. The man who says nothing about his plans, who simply disappears into work, into building, into creating, and then one day produces something real. That man creates a moment that cannot be manufactured through conversation. He delivers, and delivery is the most powerful thing a man can do. There's also something deeper here. When a man overtalks his future, he often does so because he needs her reaction and to fuel his motivation. He is outsourcing his drive, he needs her enthusiasm to sustain his own. And that is a fragile foundation for anything. For a business, for a goal, for a relationship. The man who moves in silence does so because his motivation comes from within. He is not seeking permission. He is not seeking fuel. He already has it. Say less about where you are going. Do more to get there. Let her watch you arrive. Now we need to stop and reframe everything you have just heard. Because there is a version of this message that sounds like, be cold, be closed, be a wall, withhold yourself to manipulate, play games with emotion to gain an upper hand. And that is not what any of this is about, not even close. What we are talking about is not hiding, it is a control. And the distinction is everything. Hiding is reactive. It is the behavior of a man who is afraid of being seen, afraid of being rejected, afraid of what honesty might cost him. He withholds because he has no other option. He is not choosing discipline. He is choosing protection. What we are describing is entirely different. This is a man who is fully self-aware, who knows his pain, his doubts, his insecurities, his needs, his dreams, and who has developed the internal capacity to hold them, process them, and choose with intention how and when and how much to express. He is not repressing his reality. He is governing his expression of it. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a man who is controlled by his emotions and a man who controls them. This is emotional discipline. This is psychological maturity. This is the kind of eternal architecture that most men have never been taught to build, because modern culture has confused emotional expression with emotional health, as if the act of saying everything automatically makes you whole. It doesn't. Processing makes you whole. Expression is just the final step, and the final step requires as much care as all the ones that came before it. The controlled man communicates differently. He speaks less, but what he says carries weight. He doesn't fill every silence. He doesn't explain himself constantly. He doesn't justify his choices to people who haven't earned that level of access. His words mean something because they are rationed, not out of scarcity, but out of respect for language itself. Watch how a man like this moves in conversation. He listens more than he speaks. When he responds, he is precise. He doesn't react immediately to emotional provocations. He pauses, processes, then speaks. His body is still. His face doesn't betray every passing thought. He creates the impression, accurate or not, that there is always more beneath the surface, and that an impression is never entirely wrong. Now let's talk about frame. Because the man who reveals less does not just communicate differently. He occupies space differently. He holds frame. Frame is the invisible structure of every interaction. It is the answer to the question, whose reality are we operating in right now? Whose emotional state sets the tone? Whose energy defines the room? In every relationship, in every conversation, there is a frame, and someone is holding it. The question is whether that someone is you. A man who overexposes himself loses frame almost automatically. Because the moment you begin narrating your inner instability, your fears, your doubts, your need for reassurance, you have handed the frame to someone else. You have made your emotional state the subject of the interaction, and whoever controls the subject controls the frame. The man who reveals selectively, who remains composed under pressure, who does not escalate when she escalates and does not collapse when things become uncertain. That man holds frame. He is the constant. She may test it. She may push against it consciously or not to see if it is real, and every time it holds, his value increases. Every time he maintains composure without coldness, strength without cruelty, mystery without absence, the frame solidifies. This is what women mean, even when they don't know how to say it. When they describe a man as, quote, 3, they mean he holds frame. They mean his inner state is not contingent on her behavior. They mean that being around him feels grounded, because he is grounded. Not because everything is perfect, but because he does not need everything to be perfect in order to remain himself. There is a trap, and most men fall into it without ever seeing it, and it is worth naming clearly so you can recognize it when it comes. The trap is this. You have been taught that authenticity means expressing everything, that holding anything back is dishonest, that the truly evolved man is one with no internal walls, no private reserves, no parts of himself he keeps for himself alone. And because this message has been repeated so many times, in so many contexts, by so many voices that seem reasonable, you have come to believe it. But this is not authenticity. This is exposure. And exposure without discretion is not strength, it is the absence of it. Real authenticity is not the same as total transparency. A man can be completely authentic, meaning everything he expresses is true, nothing he presents is false, while still choosing not to express everything. Authenticity is about integrity between what you feel and what you say. It is not a mandate to say everything you feel, to everyone, at every moment. The confusion between these two things has produced an entire generation of men who mistake oversharing for emotional courage, who think that the more they say, the more real they are being. But real courage is not in the saying. It is in the living, in the building, in the carrying, in the doing of hard things without needing an audience for the difficulty. The man who does his inner work silently and then shows up with results. That man is more authentic than the man who narrates every stage of the struggle and never quite arrives anywhere. Authenticity is a function of alignment between words and actions, not a function of volume, and the modern culture that pushes you toward total disclosure. Understand what it is really asking of you. It is asking you to externalize everything, to outsource your processing, to make your interior world a public document. And in doing so, it is asking you to give up the very thing that creates the kind of internal gravity that makes a man compelling. Do not mistake noise for depth. Do not mistake disclosure for connection. The deepest connections are not built by saying everything. They are built by two people who have the depth to know what to keep and the wisdom to know what to share. Now we arrive at the collapse. The pattern you have probably seen, maybe in others, maybe in yourself, that explains exactly how everything goes wrong. The man who gives too much too soon. The man who, from the earliest stages of connection, operates at full disclosure. He is enthusiastic, open, communicative. He tells her how much he likes her. Early. He shares his fears. Early. He talks about his past relationships, his family wounds, his uncertainties about the future. He is available, immediately, completely, consistently. And she responds warmly, at first, because openness invites openness, because the early stages of connection are fueled by revelation. But here's what he doesn't understand. There is a point, a specific, identifiable point, where the revelation stops being exciting and starts being overwhelming, where what felt like depth starts feeling like need, where what she initially found touching starts feeling like a weight she didn't agree to carry, and the man misses it, because he is watching his own feelings, not hers. He is tracking his own experience of the connection, which is positive, which is deepening, which feels like real intimacy. And he is not tracking what is shifting for her. By the time he notices, she is already withdrawing. And he does the worst possible thing. He gives more openness, more sharing, more reassurance seeking. Because the only tool he has is the one that caused the problem. And the gap between them widens. This is not her failure. This is not cruelty. This is the predictable consequence of a man who never learned to govern his own expression, who never understood that the pace of revelation matters, that depth must be earned over time, not delivered all at once, that a woman, like every human being, is drawn toward what unfolds gradually, not what arrives already fully assembled. The nice guy who gives everything and receives nothing in return is not suffering because he is too good. He is suffering because he has misunderstood the dynamics entirely. Generosity without discernment is not virtue, it is pattern. And patterns produce predictable results. Here is where the philosophy must enter the room, because without this, everything we have discussed could be misread as strategy, as tactic, as a set of techniques to deploy in the pursuit of attraction. And that is not the full picture. There is a distinction, a critical, irreducible distinction, between love and attraction. And most men never sit down and think about it clearly. So let's do it now. Love is comfort. Love is safety. Love is the deep, slow, abiding knowledge of another person, their history, their texture, their contradictions, their ordinary days. Love is built in the space where fences come down, where the full self is known, where there is no performance, no mystery, no game. Love is arrival. Attraction is something else entirely. Attraction is tension. Attraction is the gap between what is known and what is not. It is the thing that makes you lean forward, that keeps you reaching, that prevents you from looking away. Attraction lives in uncertainty. It requires the possibility, now, however small, that this could end, that this could be lost, that nothing is fully secured. Attraction is pursuit, even when the pursuit is subtle. And here's the paradox that most long-term relationships fail to navigate. The behaviors that create love, openness, stability, full presence, total availability, are the very behaviors that erode attraction. And the behaviors that sustain attraction, mystery, selective expression, independence, the maintained sense that there is always more to discover, can, if taken too far, prevent real love from ever forming. The man who understands this is not trying to choose one over the other. He is trying to hold both. He is building something with real depth, with genuine intimacy, real trust, real history, while maintaining enough internal territory that the discovery never fully ends. He remains, in some irreducible way, a person she is still figuring out, not because he is performing mystery, but because he has enough genuine interior complexity that mystery is simply the natural result. This is not a contradiction. It is a balance. It requires sophistication. It requires knowing when to reveal and when to hold back, when to be fully present and when to maintain your own center, when to share and when to process privately, when to move toward and when to be still. Most men lean too far in one direction. They give everything and wonder why desire fades, or they give nothing and wonder why connection never forms. The art is in the navigation, and like all art, it requires years of practice, a willingness to fail, and a genuine understanding of what you are trying to create. What you withhold shapes how you are perceived. This is the paradox at the center of everything we have discussed. It seems counterintuitive because we live in a world that tells us value is expressed through display, through showing, through making visible. But in the domain of human attraction, in the deep pre-rational evolutionary domain where desire actually operates, value is often communicated through restraint. The man who holds something back signals that there is something worth holding. The man who shares selectively signals that he has a self that exists apart from what he performs. The man who speaks less signals that his words, when they come, will be worth hearing. The man who controls his expression of pain signals that he can carry weight. The man who keeps his future plans private until they are real signals that he operates in the domain of action, not aspiration. None of this is dishonesty. None of this is game playing. It is the natural expression of a man who has done the work, who has built something inside himself worth protecting, who has developed enough internal density that not everything needs to be said, because he knows, at a level beneath words, that what he is speaks louder than what he shares. The most compelling men in any room are not the ones who tell you the most about themselves. They are the ones who make you want to know more. They make you lean forward, they make you curious. And that curiosity and that reaching, that wondering, is the engine of attraction. It does not require engineering. It is the natural byproduct of a man who has cultivated depth and learned the art of selective expression. So here is where we arrive. You have a choice. And it is simpler than it sounds, even though it will take everything you have to execute it. You can be fully known, or you can be deeply desired. You can be the man who says everything, or the man who means everything he says. You can be the open book finished in an afternoon, or the one that takes years to read and never quite reveals its final page. This is not a call to become someone you are not. It is a call to become more fully who you are, by building the internal architecture that most men were never taught to build, by learning to process before you express, by choosing silence when silence communicates more than speech, by letting your actions carry the weight that most men try to carry with their words. The 5 rules are not rules in the mechanical sense. They are not techniques. They are the natural expression of a particular kind of man, a man who has developed genuine internal stability, who knows his own worth without needing constant confirmation, who has a life rich enough to not require someone else's approval as its foundation. Never fully reveal your pain before you have processed it. Keep part of your inner world yours alone. Let your insecurities and fears be things you work through, not things you perform. Stop seeking validation from the outside when the only real validation comes from within. And never speak about your future before you have built it. These are not strategies. They are disciplines. And disciplines, unlike strategies, do not end when the game is over. They become who you are. Start there. Build there. And let what you withhold, as much as what you reveal, define the man you're becoming.